Good afternoon, students. I hope you're all well. I hope you're warm and that you have power. Right now, I do have electricity. I'm sending this probably a little early to you in case I lose electricity. So I'm sorry we're missing this week. I do have some exciting stuff to talk about and I can't afford to miss it. All right, so I will expect you to watch this presentation and furthermore to get your homework done. Okay, so we're on week 20. It's called A Changing World. And let's see what we've got going on now. Okay, so we talked about Spain earlier when we looked at Christopher Columbus and all that. And this is Isabella and Ferdinand. Okay, so they had united Spain. Remember what they did in 1492? In addition to sending out Columbus, they got the Muslims out of the land. They sent the Jews out of the land. They were consolidating their power around the Catholic Church. Furthermore, they got very wealthy from what was happening over in the New World when, that gold was coming back to them. We'll see that most of the gold came to one of their descendants later on, but they were becoming wealthy. They were becoming, essentially, I would say, probably the number one superpower in the world at this point in time. So let's look at their family, the family tree. Okay, so they had 5 children. One boy named John. We've already met their daughter, their youngest daughter, Catherine, because she had married Henry VIII. And remember, she and Henry had a daughter named Mary, who became Bloody Mary of England. All right, so today what we're going to look at is we're going to key in on this woman right here. This is Juana. Now, Juana it's also known as Joan, if you say it in English, but Juana has a nickname, and the nickname is Juana la Loca, which means, if you know any Spanish, Juana the Crazy, or Juana the Mad. Okay, so let's check out what was going on here. Over in Germany, we'll see how these mix together here in just a second. We have the Habsburg Empire. So you've met this guy before. His name is Maximilian. He had become the Holy Roman Emperor. He was from the very, very rich and influential family called the Habsburgs. And he had a fortuitous marriage with the woman called Mary of Burgundy. Mary of Burgundy was the daughter of Charles the Bold. He was the Duke of Burgundy who was so influential, but ended up, when we talked about him being bold, it really was about him being reckless. He ended up dying in a battle, and his daughter became the most eligible bachelorette in all of the land, and this is the man she married, and his name is Maximilian. They had a child. His name is Philip, and he's known as Philip the Handsome. All right, so they're going to look around for him to have an advantageous marriage, looking all through Europe. Who is the rising power? All right, it's over there in Spain. So they chose for Philip to be married to the daughter of Isabella, and Ferdinand, the daughter named Juana. By the way, Mary of Burgundy had a sad end. She actually died in a horsing accident when she was still fairly young, leaving Maximilian heartbroken. Here is a picture before that happened. We see Philip the Handsome is this one right back here. Oh, can you see that? Here's Philip. This is Maximilian. This is Mary. And this is Philip. And this is his children, his 2 children. We're going to key in on this guy right here. His name is Charles. This is another boy. It's a nephew or something. I can't remember exactly his name. But those other 2, we have Charles and Ferdinand. Okay, yes, there's Philip the Handsome. I pointed him out. All right, so Philip and Joan became married, and we see that Juana fell madly in love with Philip. And she actually came up to marry him up there in Flanders, because that would have been the area of the Holy Roman Empire where the Habsburgs were living. So Flanders is the modern-day area we know as Belgium. And so she came up there. Notice he's got that Order of the Golden Fleece. He's wearing that, right? That's what came, his grandfather, let's see, it would have been his great-grandfather, right? Yeah, Charles the Bold's father, who came up with that. So they had a son, so she did her duty, right? And here he is. His name is Charles. He was born in the year 1500 in the city of Ghent, which is in Flanders, and he grew up there. And here he is with his dog, living in splendor, this kind of thing. And he grew up, and you can see, you'll start to notice a little bit that he has a very prominent chin. Okay, so the shape of his chin, they call it the Habsburg chin. It is a family trait, if you will, a genetic trait. that will carry on through the family. And because the Habsburgs tended to marry cousins that were also of the Habsburg dynasty, this trait will carry down to really tragic results later on. In 1504, Isabella, the Queen of Spain, died, and her husband was left. So Ferdinand was still there. If you remember, he was, I think he was a few years younger than Isabella. And he would now be the sole ruler, except that Isabella left the crown to her daughter. Something happened to their son John that he was not able to take over the kingdom. So he was not alive anymore. I think Juana was now first in line for this. So Philip saw an amazing opportunity to become the king of Spain. And so they went to Spain and noticed that Juana is now proclaimed Queen of Castile. That's the area her mother was in charge of. Her husband was not named king, however. He was named consort at this point. Juana's father, Ferdinand, married a young niece, and he ran off actually to Naples. He was very unpopular in this country by now, and the people pinned most of their hope now on this young, vibrant couple who had come from Flanders. So we see Philip and Juana. But behind the scenes, unbeknownst to Juana, Philip had made a deal with Ferdinand, and that was to basically steal the kingdom from her, and that Philip would be in charge. He would become the king and take it from Juana. So very rude right there of him, right? Then one day, the young and healthy Philip came down with a fever. It turns out that the story goes that he was playing a tennis game, a tennis match, and it was a very hot day. And after the match was over, he took a nice cold draught of water, and after that he became very ill and getting this fever. And within a few days he actually died. And Juana was completely grief-stricken. I mean, unbelievable. No one could console her at all. She suspected that perhaps her father had killed Philip. It doesn't seem likely. Or that perhaps somebody else who was a enemy of the state, either of the Habsburgs or of Castile. We don't know that was the case. She couldn't leave his body. In fact, while they were transporting him back to Flanders for burial, every time they came to any kind of lull, she would make everybody stop and open up the casket to make sure he was really dead. She was sure that he wasn't really dead, and she was completely overwhelmed by that feeling. So this is where she gets her nickname, Juana la Loca. Okay, so Joan the Mad. And because people believe she kind of went a little crazy at this time. In fact, she said she was too sad to rule the country. She wasn't able to do it, so she confined herself with she had several children, and Charles, of course, being the son who was at this time, I believe, in his teens, and now she had some children, some girls with her. So she asked her father to rule, and he did. He came back to do that. And then when Ferdinand died, everything went to young Charles. So this is apparently the place where Juana was living, and you can see here she was kept in a room with some nurses, and it looks like a mess here, and that really is maybe propaganda showing that she was a little bit nuts. She did believe that these nurses, I think they were nuns, who were supposed to take care of her, she was suspicious of them. She thought they were trying to poison her. She wouldn't eat any food, so she was getting very ill and losing weight and this kind of stuff. She had, you can see her there to the left with one of her little daughters who stayed there with her. And then we get to 1519. I will tell you real quick before I move on from here. Charles, her son Charles, who was by this time an adult, he basically turned on his mother. He's the one that proliferated that idea of her being crazy, and he did not really want much to do with her. Yeah, very sad. Okay, 1519 comes along. Ferdinand has, Maximilian now has died. So Maximilian was Philip's father. Remember, he was the Holy Roman Emperor. And so now, if you recall, the Holy Roman Emperor is elected to his post. Remember that? And remember those princes in Germany elect the new Holy Roman Emperor. It doesn't have to be something that goes from father to son. And so there were some contenders for the emperor position. Here's our first guy. That's Charles, of course. He is contending. He has a good claim because his father was Maximilian. And, I'm sorry, his grandfather was Maximilian. And this is the King of France. His name is Francis I. He would like to be the Holy Roman Emperor too. And our third guy that comes in is somebody we know quite well. Here he is. That is a young picture of Henry VIII from England. All right, so now the idea was they're going to essentially campaign for this office, and then the votes will go to those princes who are the German princes, namely the Protestant princes. At this point, all three of these contenders are definitely Catholic. And you're going to see just after this election takes place is when Martin Luther makes his big push. Okay, so we haven't had quite the understanding of that Reformation quite yet until about this time. So who's the winner? With a lot of money paid out, the prize goes to Charles. Okay, so Charles wins, and he is now the Holy Roman Emperor. And then that's when Ferdinand died. Okay, so now Charles is the king of everything. His mother has been put away at this point, so he's now declared king of Spain. He also is the Duke of Burgundy by right of his grandmother, Mary of Burgundy. He's the Archduke of Austria, the Count of Flanders, but that wasn't quite enough. He wanted more. So he decided, being that he was the king of Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor, what country is in between there? France. So he decides to go to war with the new king of France, Francis I. See how France is in the middle right there? All right, so he says, hey, why don't I take it all and become the king of everything? Not to mention, look at this, is all owned. Everything in the red that you see is all owned by Spain. All right, therefore it goes to Charles, right? The New World, everything over there in North America, and then beyond the line of demarcation in South America. You can see that, and we even see some stuff over the Philippines. Remember, Magellan had landed there. In fact, Magellan was killed there. And then whatever that is over here in Africa, a few places here. All right, so he is king of quite a lot. It was actually to Charles that Cortez sent back all the gold from the Aztecs, and he received the news of Magellan's circumnavigation of the planet. Keep in mind, Magellan himself had perished during that time, but his expedition did succeed in doing that. All right, there he is being killed in the Philippines area. That's Magellan, who met his end right there. Okay. 1521 is the Diet of Worms. We've talked about this, and remember that is Charles. Charles was the one judging this. And with my classes, remember, we watched that little video of him sitting there, and he was a very young man, and he was upset with what Martin Luther was saying. And of course, he condemned Martin Luther at that diet. Okay, so let's look at the religious happenings going on here. Everything that's yellow is still faithful to the Catholic Church. So we see all of Spain, France, and then a good portion of what is known as the Holy Roman Empire, especially down near Rome itself, so part of all of Italy right here. But you can see we have in the blue area, this would be Lutheran, so that would be Martin Luther's influence, even all the way up into here, okay? The red is going to be John Calvin's influence, so that would be the French Calvinist or the Huguenots, which also had a huge influence up here in Scotland with a guy named John Knox. We talked about him when we talked about Mary, Queen of Scots. Remember, he had brought the Reformed religion there. And then we, of course, have the Church of England here, also known as Anglican, which has taken over this part of England. At this point, Ireland would be considered all Catholic. I think this part comes a little bit later. All right, over here we have the Eastern Orthodox in the purple area. And I'm thinking Islam. I don't really see it on this map. It's supposed to look like that. Thinking right here. Okay. All right, and so Charles, of course, is faithful to the Catholic Church. There he is. Okay, he was thoroughly Catholic. Yeah, he had little tolerance for the Reformation, but he needed those princes to vote for him, right? And they did. And now he needed those soldiers for all these numerous wars he was waging. That's Martin Luther to the right there. Okay. The wars now he has with Francis. He's going to have a big battle with him. But Charles had an ally. This is Henry VIII. Remember at this point, so at this time in our history, Henry is still married to Catherine, who is Charles's aunt. This is Catherine of Aragon, right? And it's going to change here in just a little bit when Henry decides he wants a new wife. But at this moment in time, he is still faithful to the Pope, and he's faithful to his brother, or so I guess his nephew-in-law, Charles. Now Charles is going to fight against Francis in France at the Battle of Pavia in 1525. Francis was overwhelmed. He was actually winning the battle at first, and then the Spanish came in with some allies from another direction, came in and were able to they won the battle and captured Francis and actually put him in jail in Spain. Oh my goodness, it was a huge debacle for France at this point. The winner, Charles. He's going to win everything, it turns out. Now, this might seem kind of strange. This is Charles versus Rome, okay? So what happened here is we have the Pope right here. Do you recognize him? He's one of the Medici popes. He is Giuliano de' Medici, and his Pope name is, which one is it? Clement? Clement the 7th, right? And here he is, and Charles is actually going to wage war against him. So it turns out that Clement had allied with Francis. And a couple of the reasons for this. First of all, he thought the Habsburg family were probably getting a little too powerful, and maybe Charles was wanting to take over the whole world, kind of a thing. Secondly, he had a niece that he had just married to the son of the king's, to the son of the king. So Francis had a son named Henri or Henry, who married Clement's niece, Catherine de' Medici. And so therefore he sided with Francis against Charles. So Charles was fighting Francis kind of close to Rome, actually. And the Pope had taken the side of France. But Clement also had another ally. Guess who? Yes, Henry's back. So Henry was his ally. Keep in mind that Henry was trying to get something from Clement at that point in time. Remember what he was trying to get? He was trying to get a divorce. All right, so he was trying to keep Clement happy. Now he's on the wrong side with his nephew-in-law. And he certainly wasn't on the side of Francis. He couldn't stand Francis. But he did want to stay on the side of the Pope at this point. So once the troops of Charles had defeated the French, they're sitting there close to Rome, and many of the soldiers in this army were actually Protestants because they'd come from the Lutheran areas of the Holy Roman Empire. And so they didn't have as much respect for Rome or for the Pope or this kind of thing, and they ended up camping around Rome demanding to be paid their wages for having fought in this war. Well, Charles was slow in getting that money to them. So slow, in fact, that they ended up actually charging into the Pope's area. By this time, the Pope was very sick. He probably had some sort of, illness. Some people believe that maybe he ate poisonous mushrooms. Remember, we hear that story, but it seems like his illness kind of went on. He went to linger a little bit on that, but he's going to end up at the end of this, soon after this. He's put into a prison, basically, while they're sieging the city of Rome. It's crazy stuff. And they actually took the city. At this point, Clement is convinced to go ahead and crown Charles. Charles wanted that crown from the Pope, just like Charlemagne had so many hundred years earlier. And so Clement agreed to do this. But like I said, Clement was very ill, and it wasn't long after this that he actually died. Some people blame Charles, but I don't think he had anything to do with it. Around this time, we do have an invasion of the area over by Constantinople, and that is with Suleiman the Magnificent, and Charles went to go fight against Suleiman. I believe he was trying to invade Italy at this point, and Charles takes his armies down there, and he defeats him. Who's the winner? Once again, we have Charles. So this is an interesting picture here. We have Charles sitting on his throne. He's holding basically the world in his hands with this sort of orb here. And let's see, who do we have? We have, one of these is supposed to be Francis. I guess this one, you see his French flag right here. One of them is the Pope. There he is. This, I believe, is representing the Muslim nations right here, and I believe these are representing the Holy Roman Empire, so the areas of Flanders and Germany and that kind of thing. So it sort of shows him in charge of everything. But he was also exhausted after all of this. Much time had gone by. I've gone through it quickly, but obviously this took years and years for it to take place. So Charles decided what he's going to do, that his empire is massive, it's huge, it's vast, it's too big to be run by one man. So he's going to actually abdicate and split it between his brother and his son. So his son, you see right here, is Philip, right? So that's the same Philip we've met before. He married Bloody Mary, right? And this is his brother Ferdinand. All right, he's going to send, he's going to give Spain to his son. We see Philip right down here, and Flanders. Is that him? Yeah. So that's Philip up there. So he gets Spain, all the Americas, and the Flanders area, the Netherlands area, and then the empire right here, the part that's mostly Austria-Germany area, is going to his brother Ferdinand. All right, so he goes off to retire. He was a great collector of art. He actually retired to a monastery in 1556, and look, he only lived 2 more years, and he died. This is somebody showing him a painting that he's purchasing. He was pretty in a lot of agony right here because he had a condition known as gout. It's called gout. It's where you have like acids and things collect up in your joints, mostly the joints of your feet and toes, and it makes for a very painful feat. So he sat around mostly at this point in time after everything he had done, to conquer the world essentially. Okay, meanwhile, over in France, we have Francis I. Here he is. This is a picture showing him with the man called Leonardo da Vinci dying in his arms. Okay, so Leonardo da Vinci ended his life in France under Francis I, really kind of helped Francis I bring France into the Renaissance. He was one of those main actors, of main providers of Renaissance thought there. And Francis loved him. He's going to build this beautiful Chateau Fontainebleau. This is where his castle, where he is going to live with the beautiful gardens. He's kind of setting the style for gardens outside of the beautiful palaces. This palace is still there. It's not the preeminent palace in France. We'll learn that's going to come from one of Francis's descendants in a couple of weeks. We'll learn about that. You can see it from above here. Quite opulent, huge, large hallways and rooms. Here we go. We can see kind of the gardens that are around here. Just a beautiful, beautiful place near Paris. Inside, opulent, all the art here in those long hallways. We have art on every wall. Okay, but he had a problem. So Francis had a problem, just like the Holy Roman Empire had a problem, just like England had a problem, and that was the differences in religion. Okay, so while the Catholic Church was very strong in France, there was a growing population of Protestants who were taking similar ideas to that Martin Luther had and putting a spin on them. Okay, these people are called the Huguenots. We can call them Huguenot if you like. That would be the English pronunciation. The French pronunciation would be Huguenot. So I might call them one time and something another time. Yeah. It was John Calvin. Remember, he was the French Protestant who had to flee the country at a time of persecution, and he ended up over in Geneva and had his own basically little government over there. Quite a fascinating deal. He developed his theories here. Very nice. Oh, let me go back to him. He was very influential as far as developing what we call the Reformed faith in Christianity. Okay, so it is part of the Reformation. He is probably a little more studious. I don't want to put down Martin Luther at all because he did quite a bit, no question. But John Calvin was I believe, more systematic in the way that he explained the truths. Meanwhile, in France, what was happening is that there was a persecution of these people. So Francis was involved with persecuting the Protestants. In this particular case, the Waldensian Protestants, remember Peter Waldo and the group that had followed him. This particular event is called the Massacre of Marandal. And so in Marandal, we have some people who are Protestants, and they're given the opportunity to convert back to Catholicism, and when they did not do that, they were thrown from a giant cliff. Here we see him, looks like some sort of parapet of a building right here is a woman being thrown off right there. The new pope, after Clement had died, is a guy called Paul III. Pope Paul III was the one who was going to bring the Catholic Church sort of out of the darker, times and bring it into the new era, which they're going to call the Counter-Reformation. They're going to have an answer for the reformers and show how they can reform the church from within. And it's Paul that's going to do that. And one of the key aspects of that was to not allow the Protestant view to take hold. And so the Pope actually approved of what Francis did here. He believed that he gave these people plenty of opportunity to repent of their Protestantism, and when they didn't do it, they were executed for that. Then Francis died in 1547, and his son becomes Henry, or Henri II, in 1547. Here he is, so we're going to have to keep these Henrys straight right here. There's going to be quite a few of them. This is his tutor, a woman who had raised him, and she was his girlfriend as well. But she was not a proper wife, so he did have a marriage to, as I mentioned earlier, Pope Clement's niece. Her name is Catherine de' Medici. There's this big celebration in Paris when we're going to have the king and his young wife show up. Here she is, Catherine de' Medici, the great-granddaughter of Lorenzo il Magnifico. Remember him from way back, okay? So that family name, and we're not done with the Medici yet, okay? There were the two popes, and now we have Catherine, and then we'll have another French queen coming soon. All right off the bat, she gave him a son, which is exactly what he wanted. All right, so here she is with him. Here's their family tree. So their son is Francis II, going to be named after Grandpa, right here. We've actually met him already because when we talked about Mary, Queen of Scots, this is the young prince, the Dauphin of France. That means he's the crown prince. He's going to marry Mary, Queen of Scots. There's a sister, Elizabeth. She married Philip of Spain. That would have been Charles's son. Then we have Claude. She married the Duke of Lorraine. We have the next son, who is Charles IX, who will become Charles IX. He'll be king. We have Henry III, another king. And then Margaret, who is going to marry another guy named Henry. He will become king of France. So Catherine did her job, giving her husband lots of children, including 3 strapping sons. There was actually another son who was named Hercule, which is the French word for Hercules. But he was kind of weakly and not very strong. And when his brother Francis died, he was probably around, I must say he's around 5 years old. He took the name Francis himself. So if you look at the children of Henry and Catherine, you will see they will have 2 sons named Francis. But that's the reason why. She also ended up having twin daughters, Victoria and I think Joan were their names, but they did not survive. In fact, one of them died while the birth was taking place in a very gruesome way. But the children did not survive, is my point. Okay, so the French were helping with some of the battles against Protestants, just like his father had done. Henry was having battles against Protestants in France, but also helping somewhat in the area of the Holy Roman Empire, helping to battle against some of the Protestant, so we call them the wars of religion. And at one point they had won this big battle and they're very excited about it. So Henry decided that he wanted to have a big party to celebrate this win. And he said, let's have a jousting match, just like the good old days. So this is showing a picture of them jousting. And so we have Henry, and he's going to joust against one of the other, French diplomats, one of the French princes, whatever it was, not family. But it ended up that the lance came in and actually slipped and ended up in the mask of the king, piercing his eye and into his brain, and it killed him. So Henry is dead. So what's going to happen? Well, Catherine, his wife, is essentially going to take over running the country because her son, she has all those sons, but they are young, okay? So she'll become the central figure of the French Counter-Reformation because this is the time when the Catholic Church is going through the Counter-Reformation, and she's going to be sort of the face of the Counter-Reformation in France. Now, I tend to maybe give Catherine a bad rap. I'll give you some ideas of things that happened in her life, and you see if I'm too harsh on her. Okay, she had her sons. Okay, these are going to end up being the last of the Valois dynasty. We're going to have the Dauphin, who is Francis II. He became king at this point in time. His father is dead. Francis is now Francis II. I believe he was about, I'm going to say 16 or 17 years old, and he had his young wife, Mary, who was 17 or 18, so she's a couple years older than Francis, and they became the king and queen of France. But then something happened. We're not exactly sure, but there was some sort of infection, we think in Francis's tooth or his ear, or even between his ear and his tooth. Anyway, it was an abscess of some sort, an infection that actually went into his brain and killed him. So he was only the king of France for about a year, which meant that Mary, Queen of Scots, was only Queen of France for about a year. And I believe we discussed how that Catherine, which would have been Mary, Queen of Scots' mother-in-law, she despised Mary, Queen of Scots. She never liked her, never thought she was good enough for her son. And so when her little boy died, she blamed Mary, Queen of Scots, and of course sent her back to Scotland. And remember those pictures of her leaving on the ship, saying goodbye to France, and she was so upset, and she ends up in Scotland, and her life, takes a very, bad turn, and all that scandal and everything. All right, so now brother Charles is going to become the next king of France. So he becomes Charles IX. He's very young, about 9 years old, and his mother is going to run the country for him. All right, then we're going to see Henry is going to take over when Charles dies. Meanwhile, let's look at this little map to the right over here. You see France right here, and you can see this is probably the leftover parts of Aquitaine right here, but there's this little kingdom right here between France and Spain called Navarre. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's part of Spain today, but at the time it was considered French. They spoke French there, and this woman is the wife of, I guess we're going to call him the King of Navarre. I don't know if he was considered a king really, maybe a duke. Her name is Jeanne d'Albret. All right, she is a Calvinist Huguenot, meaning she is a Protestant, right? She's a Protestant. Her husband was a Protestant, but by this time, I believe she's running the country because her husband has died. But she has a son, and here is her son, and I'll give you one guess what his name is. It's Henry. All right, that's why I told you we're going to have to keep our Henrys straight here. And we're not even done with our Henrys. There's more Henrys to learn about. Okay, she's a fascinating woman who was very bright. She realized that she was in the minority as being a Huguenot, and her son was brought up in the Protestant tradition, and he was, as far as I could tell, genuinely Protestant. We'll see how that's going to be affected here pretty soon. Charles is the king. Mary went back to Scotland. His mother was in charge, just like I said before, so here he is. And he and his mother came up with an idea in order to unify the Huguenots with the Catholics. Their idea was to take young Henry of Navarre, right? He's of the family called Bourbon, and they will marry him to one of the daughters. She was that last daughter on our picture a few slides ago. Her name is Marguerite, or Margaret. And this would unite the Catholics and the Huguenots. And so the question is, was this a smart move on Henry Navarre's, was it smart for him? And his mother, Jeanne d'Albret, was very excited about this. She said, hey, finally we can have France united. It will be great. And so they agreed to it. They'd agreed that there would be a wedding. And in this wedding, they would invite everyone to come to Paris for the wedding. We have the Catholics there, we have the Protestant Huguenots coming there, and we're going to see that unity that's going to be created. Sadly, it looks like Catherine may have had a different idea. And so there was another family that was very influential at this point called the Guise family. In fact, that Mary Queen of Scots' mother was Mary of Guise. So the Guise family, a very prominent Catholic family, may have had some influence on this decision that was made. So I might be giving Catherine a little bit of a bum rap here. So the wedding day took place on a thing called St. Bartholomew's Eve, the eve before St. Bartholomew's Day. Okay, so the Huguenots were there in Paris, ready for the festivities. At the end of the week, on the eve of St. Bartholomew's Day, the massacre began. What? Yes, so we call it St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. So after the wedding took place, it was a Catholic service. Henry agreed to that. He and Marguerite were married. And the next day, when everybody had been celebrating and now they're sort of, sleeping it off and this kind of thing, then the French army comes out and begins a massacre of the people. This man is Gaspard de Coligny. He was in Paris that day. He had come to the wedding, and he was in charge of the armies of the Huguenots, the armies that had been fighting against the Catholic armies for years. So there was great, not trust. There was distrust on the side of everyone, but he was there. And as this massacre began, in the rest of the country, the word was put out that it was okay for Catholics to go out into the streets and find Huguenots and kill them. So they think lots of people were killed that day in Paris, but people were killed all throughout the land, and they're saying possibly up to 100,000 Huguenots were killed that time, including Gaspard de Coligny in Paris. Here he is being dragged. After he's dead, they're throwing him out of a window to show everybody, here is your great military leader, which he had actually been a good military leader. Here he is at the end of his life. And so this is one of the biggest, just shocking events of the wars of the religion in France. Here comes Catherine de Medici coming out to inspect the streets of Paris after that, and they're just dead people laying in the streets. Now, this painting is probably not accurate to reality. It looks like she's so cold about everything, and these other, guests who had been at the wedding. So what about Henry? By the way, his mother, Jeanne d'Albret, just a few weeks before the wedding took place, she had been invited by Catherine to visit her perfumer, to give her a gift of this lovely perfume and these lovely pair of gloves. And apparently what they did was they would put the perfume on the gloves so you could, put your hands up to your face and smell them. Well, as she put those gloves on and smelled that perfume, she got violently ill, came home and said she didn't feel well. She laid down and she died. So that was Jeanne d'Albret, Henry of Navarre's mother. And so, people blame Catherine for that. Maybe it was just coincidence. I don't know. But she wasn't here for this because she had already died. Henry of Navarre, who has just married to Marguerite, survived this. He was not killed, mostly because his young wife defended him. And she said, don't touch my new husband. And nobody came and touched him. They said, we will leave him alone if he will agree to become a Catholic. And of course, he agreed at that moment to become a Catholic. He went back on that, by the way. He did not do it at this time. I believe this picture right here is showing where there's a wedding celebration going on inside the palace, and outside there's a massacre taking place. Yikes. All right. Now, Charles was the king, but he felt horrible. Was a young guy. He felt terrible about what had happened during that St. Bartholomew Day massacre. And apparently his guilt, whatever, he led to an early death. None of the boys were of very great health. And now his brother's going to become Henry III. Okay, so we have Henry of Navarre, and we have here Henry III, the King of France. Catherine de Medici is regent, although Henry is old enough. He's about 20, so he's old enough to be king himself, but his mother is so powerful that she wields that power against her son, Henry. Henry will end up rebelling against her soon. Her daughter, Catherine's daughter, Marguerite, and her new husband, Henry of Navarre, they had survived, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they went back to Navarre for some period of time. Now, we have three Henrys to talk about. So Henry, the King of France, Henry III. This is Henry of Navarre. I wish I had a picture of him when he was younger. This is when he's an older man. Okay, but he's the next Henry. Now, this is Henry of Guise. That's that very prominent Catholic family. And we're going to end up with these three vying for the kingdom of France. Okay, so what in the world is going on? Henry of Guise led a very large Catholic army against Henry of Navarre because of the wars of the religion. Henry of Navarre, when he got back to Navarre, he reneged on his agreement to become Catholic, and he was still a Protestant at that point. Okay, so Henry of Guise went out and had a battle against Henry Navarre and beat him, and was very successful in this battle. He goes back to Paris a hero, and he comes walking into Paris. Throngs of people, are welcoming him in and saying, "Hooray for Henry of Guise, you are the greatest Frenchman." And Henry III is a little bit concerned that Henry of Guise is getting a little too big for his britches. In fact, Henry of Guise demands things from the king. He says, "Listen, I am the hero now. You need to give me certain amounts of land, certain amounts of money, certain titles, things like this." And Henry III, the King of France, decided that Henry of Guise was trying to usurp the kingdom. So he invited Henry of Guise over for dinner in another town. And when Henry of Guise finished his dinner that night, he didn't wake up the next morning. Okay, so Henry III, probably with the help of his mother, got rid of Henry of Guise. Now, remember, he was very popular, so the people in Paris were horrified, and the popularity of Henry III dropped like a rock, and they said, "You've killed the greatest hero we ever knew." So Henry III, the King of France, goes running to protection. Guess from whom? He goes over to Henry of Navarre's place in Navarre and says, "Protect me, brother-in-law." And Henry of Navarre, of course, did that. Soon after that, things started to die down just a bit. Here's the better picture of Henry of Navarre right here. Things started to die down a little bit, and as Henry III, the King of France, went back to Paris, he actually, his mother had died, actually. So Catherine de Medici died, and Henry came back to Paris, and when he did, he was actually assassinated by a Catholic who was very upset about Henry of Guise being killed. So now that let's go back here. Henry III is now dead. Henry of Guise is now dead. The war they were having, called the War of the Three Henrys, what Henry is left? Henry of Navarre. That's right, he's the only one left. He's married to the sister of Henry III. He is next in line for the throne. Here he is. What's wrong with him? He's a Huguenot, right? He's a Protestant. So at this point, there is a league of Catholics who had been, the family of Guise had started up this called the Catholic League, and they said, under no conditions will we allow a Huguenot to become a king of France. It can't happen. We've got to figure something out. And at this point, Henry made a decision. He said, Paris is well worth a mass. So at this point, Henry's agreement to become a Catholic came true. Here he is on the left getting crowned as a Catholic king of France. And he becomes Henry IV of France. The first legislation that he passed is called the Edict of Nantes. And in the Edict of Nantes, he made it legal to practice Protestant religion. He made the Huguenot religion legal. All right, so that's the first thing he did. He's a Catholic now. But as you see, he is making the laws beneficial to the rest of the Huguenots in France. So good deal, right? Okay, so the wars of the religion kind of calmed down at this point because it's legal now to be a Huguenot, and as long as they kind of keep their head down, there was the part of the law was that they could not practice their religion freely in Paris itself. They could practice it in other parts of the country, but not in Paris. So it was still illegal to be a Protestant in Paris, but in the rest of France it was okay. So Henry, now we have Henry IV. He's our last Henry standing. He is going to remake Paris. He's going to build Paris into this fabulous, amazing, modern city. And he builds the Pont Neuf. Okay, so remember the river going through Paris is called the River Seine. And there were bridges over it, but he's going to build this new bridge. So Pont Neuf, I used to think neuf means 9 in French, but it also means new. Okay, so it's the new bridge. It's called the new bridge. It's still there today. It's very, very old, of course, but it's still known as Pont Neuf, the new bridge. And it's spanning over the Seine River right here. And you can see the rest of Paris growing up, and he's going to modernize it in many ways. He builds a new palace for himself along the river, the Seine, right here. And you can see Pont Neuf right there. There's the new bridge. And now here's this new palace. It is called the Louvre Palace, okay? And it makes it, let me show you a picture here. It shows you what part it is. Okay, so right here was an older palace called the Palais de Tuileries, the Tuileries Palace. Notice it was Catherine de Medici's palace. She lived there. And so what he did was he connected his new palace, the Louvre Palace, with this long hallway right here, the Grand Gallery, to the Tuileries. Now, the Tuileries had a beautiful garden there. I can't show you a picture of the modern-day Tuileries because it burned down. So it's not there anymore. But the gardens are still there. You can go to the Jardin des Tuileries in Paris today. And then, of course, you can also go to the Louvre. You've heard of it, haven't you? The Louvre. It's not a palace anymore, however. What is it today? One of the world's greatest museums. And it's been expanded, by the way, over into this area here. But the Tuileries Gardens are still there, and these hallways are still here. This is gone. I think there must be something new built there. But the hallways are there, and all these hallways, of course, are filled with incredible, beautiful art from around the world. Now, notice the name here. We have Marie de Medici. So, Henry IV, that's him, when he became king, he decided that his wife, Marguerite, remember, the daughter of Catherine and Henry II, that she really wasn't the wife he wanted. There was a problem. She had a problem. She hadn't given him any children. So he appealed to the Pope. Now he's Catholic, and he says to the Pope, look, I don't have any children. I need a new wife. He was given permission to divorce or otherwise get an annulment from her. So Marguerite has been sent away. He didn't like her much anyway. He sends her away, and he puts out the call for a new wife, and he had somebody in mind, and guess what? It's a Medici. Here she is. Her name is Marie. It turns out the Medici, if you recall from way back at the beginning of our year, had become very influential because they were bankers in Florence. Remember that? They were bankers. Well, Henry had borrowed a lot of money from the Medici to fund these wars of religion that he had against the Catholics. And he owed a lot of money to the Medici family. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. And so one way that he could get that paid back was to marry one of the Medici ladies right here, and then her dowry would actually wipe out that debt. So that's what happened. Here he is being shown a picture of Marie, and he says, she'll do, I'll take her. And once they got married, there are actually an incredible number of paintings showing her coming to Paris to be married. They actually got married by proxy. And then incredible amount of paintings about her that she later had ordered from a prominent artist of the time who was named Peter Paul Rubens. This painting right here, in fact, was painted by Peter Paul Rubens. He's one of the Flemish painters. Along with Rembrandt, Rubens would have been the top Flemish painters of the time. Right off the bat, she gave him a son. Looky there. So she did what she was supposed to do. All right. He was actually, now I will say that he wasn't a very good husband, okay, to Marie. He really didn't like her that much either. But she gave him sons, so he was happy about that. He was actually a pretty good dad. So here he is. There are many pictures or many tales of him playing with the children. In fact, he would have meetings with these diplomats from other countries, and he would say, oh, excuse me, I have to go play with my children. And they thought it was the strangest thing. So he was a pretty good dad. These pictures of him doing horseback are pretty common. And then he says here, if God keeps me, I will make sure that no peasant in my realm will lack the means to have a chicken in the pot on Sunday. Okay, so he wanted everybody to do well. Now his wife, okay, let's get back to this picture of his wife real quick. She had been really desiring of getting the crown as the queen. So in other words, she wanted her own coronation ceremony. And so Henry kind of put her off for a while. He didn't want to go through that. He didn't want to give her that much look of power, this kind of thing. But he finally acquiesced, and he finally said, okay, let's have a big celebration. We're going to give her this crown. And the very next day this happened. He was actually assassinated in the streets of Paris. Here he is in his carriage. And this man right here is a Catholic who believed that even though Henry had become a Catholic, that he wasn't really a very true Catholic. And that Marie de Medici actually was a Catholic, and she would be a better leader for the country. Yeah, so he's dead now. But his son is going to, he was very young, probably younger than this picture shows right here, is going to take over. He's going to be called Louis the 13th. So we're getting into our Louis here, which we're going to see is going to be very, very important very soon. Since he's young, guess who is going to help him run the country? Yep, Mama, there she is. Marie de Medici. Now she finally has her time at the top. Okay, so she got what she finally wanted to be. She's the Queen of France, but now she's the Dowager Queen because her husband's dead, and she is now going to be the regent for her son. She's going to help him run the country. Here she is actually making the decisions for everything right here. She has the most power in the land. Her son's very, very young. She sends him off to go play with his toys, and she makes the decisions. And this man, you may have heard of this man, you just don't know it yet. His name is Cardinal Richelieu. If you've ever seen any of the movies about the Three Musketeers, Richelieu would have been the guy in charge. But he's the tutor or the teacher of Louis, young Louis. And as Louis begins to grow up, Richelieu teaches him that really he can lead the country himself, and he doesn't need his mother, that his mother is sort of smothering him, taking too much power, this kind of thing. And at one point, they actually expel Marie from the country. Marie is sent away. And he says to his mother, be gone from here. And she has to actually go around to different places of Europe to find places to live. And one of the times she's with one of her daughters. Her daughter ends up marrying the King of England, who we'll learn about much later. He's the king that comes after James. So James's son was Charles. Charles married Louis's sister. Okay, so we'll learn about her pretty soon. But eventually, Marie pleaded with Richelieu, and she said, please restore my relationship with my son. And we're going to see this picture right here. And this is Richelieu reconciling the son to the mother. Doesn't look so much like it here because the son sort of had a bad attitude about his mother, thanks mostly to Richelieu. But they did make up toward the end of her life. And I'll say they were friends, I guess. That kind of works right there. She didn't have any more power in the country at all, but he did allow her to come to court. He allowed her a little bit of power, ceremonial, I guess you could say. All right, now there's no rest for the weary. We still have a Protestant problem and some Catholics who are fighting against it. This is Philip II of Spain, and he has a revolt. Remember up in the area called the Netherlands or Flanders area, we're going to call those people the Dutch. Well, there's a revolt. It's a Protestant revolt against the Catholic rulers of the area. So here are the Low Countries right here. You can see the Holy Roman Empire over here. And that was his uncle. Remember Philip's uncle Ferdinand, and I believe now Ferdinand's son, Ferdinand II, is in charge. And we see over here the areas that Philip was in charge of. And we have a lot of Protestant religion up there. And there is a revolt against the Catholics. This man was the prince of a place called Orange. Was it on our map right there? Do we see something called Orange? I don't quite see it, but it was one of these places here. And this prince is going to become a hero of the Protestants right there. We have, I believe this is Philip coming to him and telling him that he's going to invade the area. And William, Prince of Orange, knows that a rebellion is going to take place, but he doesn't tell Philip that. And so he's known today as William the Silent, for not telling what he knew about the Protestant rebellion going on. And furthermore, he rallies the Dutch. They end up taking, so that area in the Netherlands is very low. It has these dikes that are keeping the water out, things like that. You can kind of see in this picture back here, there's a windmill with some water coming over the dike right here. So what William did was he helped to actually relieve one of the cities that was being sieged by Catholics. And the way he was able to relieve them was actually to break the dike and allow his ships to sail right into the city. It flooded the city, but it allowed the ships to come in there and rescue them from this siege that was going on. So he's kind of this big hero in the area there. So Ferdinand II had taken over the area just to the east of this. That would be the Holy Roman Emperor from his father Ferdinand I, which was the brother of Charles. He had been raised with the Jesuit education. He was a super Catholic. He believed in the absolute rule. Now, the peace at Augsburg that had been signed back in 1555, that was sort of making peace between the Catholics and the Protestants, was this idea. Does anybody know Latin out there? I don't know how to pronounce it, but here are the words. So, Caius Regio, Eius Religio. I don't know if I said that right. I probably butchered it completely. But what it means is, whatever the king is what the religion is. So the religion of the country is whatever the king of the country at the time is doing. So that would be the law. Okay? So the law is, your king's a Protestant, you can be a Protestant. Your king's a Catholic, you're a Catholic. But this, Ferdinand came in and he reversed it. He said, nope, you're Catholic, that's all there is to it. So he began a systematic, brutal persecution of the Protestants in the Holy Roman Empire. He said, no, 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 no Protestantism. I'm putting down a very firm foot. In 1618, the Protestants are going to respond to this. This is one of my favorite stories of all history. In fact, I am dying to go visit the city of Prague so I can see this place. All right, here's what happened. Ferdinand sends an emissary to the people in Prague, which is one of the cities in Bohemia, Czech Republic today, and he said, you must comply with this and become Catholics and stop your Protestants, something like that. All right. And when they got there, he presented the paper to them. The Catholic emissary presents the paper to them. And what did they do? Do you know what defenestration means? It's a great word. You're going to have it in English someday. It's one of those vocabulary words. It means to throw somebody out of a window. So that's how they responded to the message from Ferdinand, is they threw the emissary, the messenger, right out the window. And it looks like here they got a second guy that's going out the window too, doesn't it? Yeah. So I want to see this place. Here's what it looks like. Oh, here's another picture because I love it so much. Here they are throwing him out the window. All right. And this other guy's fixing to go out the window, I think. The defenestration. Fenestra is a French word for window. This is the building, and there's the window up here at the top. They fell down all that way. Now, they were kind of fortunate, or maybe you see that they were okay, because it turns out that just below here was the area where the street cleaners shoveled all of the manure of the horses in the street to right there into a big pile. So there was a giant pile of manure, and these guys fell into it, and it broke their fall. They were not killed when they fell out of this window, but they were covered with some stinky stuff right there. So good. All right, this is essentially going to lead to the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, it's a little more complicated in the sense that we have the Protestant versus the Catholic, this kind of thing. But that defenestration of Prague certainly did lend toward this breaking now. In 1618 to 1648, yeah, you can do the math right there. It is 30 years long. And it's a war of religion right here. So there are 4 phases we'll be looking at. The first phase is called the Bohemian phase, because that's where the Prague situation took place, right? So Ferdinand attacked Bohemia at the Battle of White Mountain, and it was a rout. The Catholics won going away, and the Protestants were caught off guard. They did not win this battle. And we have a mercenary soldier who was kind of a hero of his name is Albrecht von Wallenstein. He was one of the local guys, but he's fighting for Ferdinand, for the Catholics, and he defeated the Protestants. All right. So the Protestants are kind of on the run at this point, and now we start the second part, the Danish phase. So Wallenstein wins, and there's a big victory, and now the Danish phase begins when the King of Denmark, a Protestant, is going to help. He's going to come in and help these people who have lost this battle in Bohemia. All right. So he comes in. Denmark, so France and England, it says join Denmark. I'm surprised at that. Okay. That Denmark gets defeated again. All right. So once again, Wallenstein wins. So the Protestants are winning nothing. Part 3, the Swedish phase. The King of Sweden decides to come in and help. This is Gustavus Adolphus, one of the really fascinating people of history. He was a true believer. He prayerfully considered this. He prayed about it, and he was going to come in and help the Protestant brothers in Germany. So it was really a matter of his heart that he wanted to do this. So he declared war on Ferdinand. He brought a large force into Germany. There was a very stormy trip, so much so that he was seasick. It was awful. But then when he landed on the ground, he praised God and said, "You've brought me across." Okay, but that storm may have been a message to him, sadly. He was brilliant, by the way. He is Protestant hero to this day in that area. All right, here he is on his horse right here. We're going to see his military tactics. He's considered the father of modern warfare. One of the reasons is he was one of the first people to mount the cannon on very maneuverable wheels. I mean, not that they were never on wheels before, but they were now put on maneuverable wheels. They could be moved around the battlefield very easily. So here we're going to see a big win for Gustavus Adolphus, the Battle of Breitenfeld. And it's hard to tell what's going on here, but here's Gustavus Adolphus up at the top. And then here is the Catholic group down here at the bottom. We're going to see some movements take place. And the mobile artillery is going to come in and actually win this kind of, I'm going to say, smaller battle right here. But then, being so confident, the king goes on to the next battle, the Battle of Lutzen, and he insists upon riding at the very front of the cavalry. And as he did, he was actually killed in battle. Yikes. So when your hero, the leader, gets killed, that sort of puts a damper on what's going on. So here he is, the king being carried off the battlefield. We're going to say, rest in peace, King Adolphus. The rest of the country said, yeah, we're done, we're out of here. They left. So really, in the end, even though he had some small victories, this is considered a loss once again for the Protestants. So the Catholics have another win. The Protestants are not looking great at all. Now we have the fourth part, the French come in. Now this is Richelieu, okay? Remember, the minister of Louis XIII? He came in. Now you're going to be surprised at this. He came in on the side of the Protestants. He's very Catholic, but the reason he's coming against the Protestants, on the side of the Protestants, is he's seeing once again the Habsburg family, that would be Ferdinand, who are getting a little too strong. And the French have this sort of very long tradition of going against the Habsburgs. So he's going to bring in the French army right here. Some interesting battles that take place. In fact, this is the time of the Three Musketeers, okay? So here he is going to defeat the Holy Roman Empire. And he is, this war at this point is not considered religious as much as it is political, okay? Because remember, he's Catholic. So he's going to have this political war to try to bring down the power of the Holy Roman Empire. It, of course, was very destructive, unbelievable. We look at these battles and say, yes, battle here, battle there, that kind of thing. But so many people died in this. And the results were just horrifying. All right, so in 1648, we're going to have a resolution, kind of. We'll say who's really winning, not really anyone. But there is going to be a peace that's going to resolve it right here. It's called the Peace of Westphalia, in a city up there in the Flanders area, where they're going to say, okay, nobody really won. But we're going to see what happens here. The deals that were made, we're going to see that the Dutch Netherlands became independent of Spain. Interesting, right? That's the French who were kind of demanding that. The French had enough of an upper hand at this point against the Holy Roman Empire that they were able to make these deals right here. So the Netherlands become independent. We can see Brandenburg is going to gain territory. That's a Protestant area of Germany. We're going to see the Alsace region is going to go to France. This is the area that they fight over in France, between France and Germany forever and ever, and wasn't ever really resolved until World War II. It's now today a part of France. We're going to see Switzerland becomes an independent confederation, which is going to end up being neutral for the rest of the time, right? And then we're going to see the Holy Roman Empire is overall weak. It's become weakened. And so we'll see that there's going to be a declining power here in the Holy Roman Empire, a little more breaking up, and an ascending power here in France. Okay, so we're going to see France really basically won that last phase of the 30 Years' War, goes to the Protestants, and that's why this was resolved this way. Calvinism is accepted and it's legalized now. Because I forgot to mention this, that Ferdinand II, not only had he reversed the Augsburg Confession, he had also basically said that that edict of Nantes was no good either in his areas, right? The rulers in the Holy Roman Empire may now adopt Calvinism as a new religion, in addition to Lutheranism and Catholicism, because remember, Calvin was over there in Geneva, in the Switzerland area. Yeah. Okay, so this was the last major religious war in Europe. It was resolved here at the Peace of Westphalia, and it really, I guess it solved some things in the sense that it did bring the Holy Roman Empire sort of down a little bit, and we're going to see now the rise of France. That's sort of bringing, Spain's going to go down too, as far as when it gets defeated over there in England with the Armada and that kind of thing. So all of this is leading us up to a rise in the power of France. Okay, that's it, y'all. We're done for this week, and then if I'm not mistaken, I may have broken this up into 2 weeks. Does that sound right? I don't remember, because I'll finish it next week. Let me see if I've got this. No, it looks like week 21 is the one I'm going to break into 2 weeks. Okay? All right, gang. Well, I hope you're all well, and I will definitely see you next week. Have a great week. See you then.